So we wanted to focus today on the people impacted by these numbers and the data that we talk about so often. So right now we're specifically going to focus on the Hispanic population when it comes to that data. And we've got a great guest here to discuss, Javier Palomares, the president and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Business Council. And Javier, great to have you. Thank you so much for coming on with us. When you look at the data from today, we're seeing that for Black workers, the labor force participation rate did tick slightly higher. And the same was true for the unemployment rate when it comes to Hispanic workers as well. But I'm curious, what was your biggest takeaway from the data today?
Let me begin by saying, first of all, that I want to thank you for having American small businesses' voice on this. The United States Hispanic Business Council is a leading advocate for our nation's 4.5 million Hispanic-owned firms in this country that collectively contribute over $800 billion to the American economy. We watch these numbers very carefully, as you can imagine. 187,000 jobs is not exceptional, but it's what was predicted. When you look at where the majority of the growth happened, it was construction, healthcare, wholesale services, things of that nature. And when you look at Hispanic employment and where there's a concentration of employees that are Hispanic descent, those happen to be the sectors. Better days are ahead of us, but certainly the numbers today, I mean, they hit the projections.
What are you hearing from the businesses on the ground, from these millions of people who you represent at the United States Hispanic Business Council, the millions of businesses? What are they saying?
Well, the market is tight. It has been tight for some time.
When you say the market is tight, are you referring to the labor market?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's really about first attracting the kind of worker you need, the employee you need, and then retaining that employee. And particularly in some segments, obviously, as you can imagine, construction and agriculture, it is a very difficult time to keep, their labor force at a level at which they need. But if you look at Hispanic employment, the state of Hispanic employment, according to the Department of Labor, between the years 2020 and 2030, a little over 79% of the net new workers entering the American workforce will be of Hispanic descent. So think about that for just a minute. Almost 80% of net new workers between the year 2020 and 2030 will be Hispanics. So this bodes well for a community that continues to grow and continues to want to do nothing more than to contribute to this nation that we love so much. There's going to be some puts and takes, and some days are better than others. But the net of it is that Hispanic employment is alive and well in the American economy, and we're thrilled at what we're seeing overall.
Yeah, and Hispanic employment, to your point, is contributing about $800 billion to the American economy when you just look at Hispanic-owned businesses in the United States. I'm curious, when you think about legislation from Washington, what do you think would be, and I see you laughing a little bit there, what do you think would be kind of the single biggest thing that you would hope that legislators in Washington would understand in order to help continue the growth that we're already seeing in these numbers, that $800 billion number that you cite for us?
That's an insightful question. And if I could figure that one out, Madison, but the reality of it is we have a Congress, we have elected officials that appear to be really disjointed from the reality of the marketplace. But with that said, there are some bright spots, some glimmers of hope. I was just with Kirsten Sinema last week. I did an hour-long question and answer session with her. And the reason I was so keen on going to sit with her and talking to her, here is a woman who was the major proponent of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. She was also a key player in the debt negotiations and saw to it that permitting was embedded into the negotiations. Now, why do we care about those two things? If you look at the infrastructure in this nation, first of all, we rank, I believe, 17th globally, while we're the wealthiest nation on the globe. That's simply unacceptable. But if you look at the industries that fall under that broad umbrella of infrastructure, what are they? Construction, transportation, wholesale, manufacturing. Where are Hispanics employed? Construction, manufacturing. So here's an individual that wasn't looking at it necessarily from a Hispanic perspective, but was clear-minded in terms of what American small business needs. And if you do right by American small business, by default, you're doing right by Hispanic-owned businesses and Hispanic entrepreneurs in this country.
Hey, one thing I wanted to touch on with you, Javier, is child labor in this country and what the Labor Department has recently found.
Yeah.
Some kids as young as 13 actually working illegally in really terrible conditions. Talk to me about what you at the U.S. Hispanic Business Council are doing about that, and what the reaction from Washington has been. You know, I hear about these stories and I think to myself, this is 2023. How are there kids illegally working in meatpacking plants in the U.S.?
Yeah. Listen, you're talking to a former migrant farm worker, English as a second language kid. I know the conditions that field laborers are working in. I've lived that, and it's deplorable. Things have gotten better since I was there, but it is a very, very difficult environment. I mean, you're working sun up to sundown in the heat, in the rain, in the snow. It doesn't matter. And you're right. The Labor Department found 4,400 cases of children working across a variety of industries throughout the United States. That's a 44% increase from last year. They've levied over $6.5 million in penalties. That's an 87% increase over last year. And while we sympathize with those industries that need the labor, we believe in commerce, of course, but commerce with a conscience. And child labor is it's undeniably wrong. It's undeniably evil. We are America. We can do better than this. We should do better than this. With that in mind, I've been busy all week talking about this, actually. And so I'm glad you asked it, Tim. Bless you for that. But with that, there's another stark reality that we have to deal with at the USHBC, and that is that industries that rely on immigrant labor, i.e. construction and agriculture. I mean, agriculture alone, 73% of the workforce in agriculture is of immigrant background. Every year, we lose 10 million tons of produce that goes unharvested. 10 million tons, not 10 million pounds, 10 million tons of produce that goes unharvested. So you can imagine the strain on the agricultural sector. And of course, we represent that sector as well.
So Javier, just because we only have a minute left with you, tell me, what is one thing that you wish would be done to specifically address the problem that you're talking about right now when it comes to farming?
There is a piece of legislation called the Dignity Act that, of all things, is being proposed by a Republican Florida woman named Maria Elvira Salazar and a Texas woman Democrat named Veronica Escobar. It is all about making sure that we have the protections that are appropriate and that are right for all people working in America, certainly for children. The Dignity Act, that's something we should really be looking at as a nation.
All right, Javier, thank you so much. This is a great conversation. We're definitely going to have you back